All right, so today we are talking about incorporating textual evidence, body paragraphs, basically, is what we're getting at. And let me say, what I'm about to go over, you guys already know this. You've talked about it probably since elementary school, and you probably talked about a similar format since elementary school. And yet, here I am saying it again. And hopefully, what I will say will be a little more advanced. Maybe it'll also be in a new way. Maybe the example will be a little more sophisticated. Um, but even the bare bones of this that you've known since elementary school, y'all still miss. So I'm emphasizing it again. And I'm also going to be emphasizing like a very strict structure to a body paragraph. And that can seem very formulaic, and I do not want to trap you in a box. If you're a good writer and if you know what you're talking about, you don't necessarily have to follow this exactly the way it is. You can still write well outside of this framework. However, this framework is extremely helpful. It's a framework that I still use in even to the point where I was writing my dissertation. This 200-page essay I had to write. I was still using a similar format to this. Um, and I think that's because even though this format might seem formulaic, it's really just a basic structure to help you know what to do, but you can really have a lot of creativity within that structure. If you think about the structure not as a step by step, but more as just the main ideas of what you need to have in your body paragraph and like a checklist of things you need to make sure you have, and then you can let your creativity flow from there. I think I talked about that before with thesis statements. Like, yes, there's lots of different ways to do it, but you need to make sure within your creativity that you're still getting the essentials of what you need. So I highly recommend following the structure, but finding some creativity within it. And hopefully you can, my example will show you a little bit of that. So I'll be using Sonnet 130, our essay from that, as an example, so that you can kind of see what's going on here. Um, I will also say that this is a little old. I created this back when Suit and Tie by Justin Timberlake was a thing, and that was a long time ago. And I kind of copy this and use it for whatever example we're talking about that day. So I apologize for that. But the information I believe is still good. So, body paragraphs. First thing, we always go back to our thesis. So I'm going to pull up a thesis. Notice that this is a different thesis statement than I gave you as an example when we went over thesis statements for the same prompt. Because there's so many different essays you could write with this prompt. So this new thesis I have as an example today. In Sonnet 130, Shakespeare uses form and imagery to portray the speaker's unique attitude towards love, showing that true love does not necessarily fit into prescribed molds. That is a thesis that shares the formula that I already gave you before. So, one thing I want us to note about this thesis to move towards body paragraphs is we have our main topic, which is the speaker's unique attitude towards love. We want to always get to that unique attitude towards love. That's what our paper is supposed to be about. We have to connect back to that. But then we also have our subtopics. So, for me, this is going to be form and imagery. Okay. So, again, I told you in your thesis one, you do not always divide up your essay by literary devices. I happen to do that this time. You don't always have to do that. But my main topic is still the unique attitude towards love. And my subtopics are form and imagery. So, getting into my body paragraph with this thesis statement, the first thing I need to do is my claim. So, and this is the language. Sometimes you call it a topic sentence, but I call it a claim. Your claim is always your first sentence. Now, I said always, of course, there are always exceptions when you say always, but it is really important to me, and I think you will find it helpful to make sure your first sentence is a claim. The reason for this is because whatever you put before you get to a claim, when anyone's reading your paper is not going to be interpreting that paragraph the way you want them to. It kind of is like Iago in Othello. So Iago always like sets the stage, sets the groundwork for how he wants people to think about things, right? So like with Brabantio, he made sure to um, informed Brabantio that Othello and Desdemona had gotten married in a very specific way to make sure he was angry about it. He frames the Cassio's drunkenness with Montano, saying, "Oh, look at this guy; he's always drunk." So he makes sure he establishes a lens through which everyone is going to view the actions that come next, and that way he knows that they're going to interpret that the way he wants them to. That's what a claim is doing. You are setting up how you want your reader to interpret the information you're about to give them. And if you don't do that, they may not interpret it the same way you do. So, your claim is very important to put first. It should directly state your subtopic. So, in this case, my subtopics were either form or imagery. So, I believe for this example, I'm using form. It needs to put form in there. If I have that in my thesis statement as one of my subtopics, then form should be in this sentence somewhere. And not just that, it needs to connect that subtopic to my theme and my main topic, right? So my main topic is the unique attitude towards love. My theme, if we go back here, so again, my subtopic is form. My main topic is the unique attitude towards love, not just the attitude towards love, but unique attitude, a descriptor for that attitude. And then my theme is covered up here by the arrows, but true love does not necessarily fit into prescribed molds, is the theme I'm going to. Remember that that theme part, that is kind of the extra above and beyond. So if you feel like you can't get all three of those, then at least get the subtopic and your main topic. But let's go back to that. So our claim has to have all that. Okay. And now here, just a little extra things. I like to think of your claim as the hanger in my suit metaphor that I'm using here. So your claim is the whole suit, the rest of the essay, the rest of the paragraph really should be hanging off of this claim. Everything else in that paragraph has to directly relate to that claim. Do not include anything in that paragraph that does not relate to that claim. If you have something else to say, put it in a new paragraph. Okay. So again, statement on which your entire paragraph hangs. And you might have heard this called the topic sentence. The reason I call it a claim instead of a topic sentence is because you're making an argument, and claim implies an argument more. So let's look at an example. So again, here's my thesis statement. So, and that was our prompt. Remember, how does Shakespeare develop the speaker's attitude towards love? So, what would a claim for a body paragraph be? Shakespeare plays with the expectations of form to develop the speaker's unique attitude towards love. So, remember, my main topic is unique attitude towards love. And then my subtopics are form and imagery. So, obviously, this one is dealing with form. Um, so, looking at this, when I told you what you had to include in your claim, I said your subtopic, your main topic, and your theme. So if you wanted to just follow the mold, like just right, like exactly formulaically, you could have said something like Shakespeare uses form to show the speaker's unique attitude towards love, showing that true love does not necessarily fit into prescribed molds. So basically, just repeating the thesis statement, except taking imagery out and just focusing on form, since that's what the paragraph is going to be about. That would be sticking to the mold too much. Although, if that's where you are right now, do that. At least you will be on topic. So I played with it a little bit here and but still included what I need to. So Shakespeare plays with the expectations of form to develop the speaker's unique attitude towards love. So I'm talking about form, but I'm giving a little bit more detail that not just with form, not just saying he uses form, that's really vague, not very good writing. But so Shakespeare plays with the expectations of form. So I'm establishing something a little bit more specific about form here. And then still connecting that to our main topic of the speaker's unique attitude towards love. So in this, I haven't necessarily mentioned the theme yet, but let's see if I do that later on. Remember, these two things are the most important, the subtopic and then the main topic. But let's move on. So that is a claim that I have here. So what's next? Next is detail. This, again, should be pretty straightforward, like just evidence from the text. I know you know what that means. So, evidence from the text that supports your subtopic. It can be a direct quote, or it can be a specific detail described in your own words. Now, I will say generally for our class, it will be a direct quote, but there are certain essays and certain times, which we'll get more into later, where it might just be a specific detail that's not a direct quote. It does have to be specific, though. Um, the dangerous thing about not doing a direct quote is that sometimes you all tend to slip into summary, and you want to avoid summary at all cost. You want to pick out a specific quote or a specific detail. You need at least two of these for each paragraph. If you just do one, I mean, that's better than nothing. But if you want to get to any kind of good score, you need at least two details per paragraph. So I call the detail the belt because it holds up. It's evidence that holds up your claim, like a belt does. A little more detail about details. So this is more of a stylistic thing that you really need to get through your head. No free floaters. Here's what I mean by that. Here is an example. This is from Aunt Jennifer's Tigers. We read that poem when we talked about annotations. So this is an example of a free floater. The tigers show the opposite of what Jennifer is. The tigers in the panel that she made will go on prancing, proud and unafraid. So here is a detail about that poem, and notice that it is there's a quote here, there's evidence, there's a detail, but the quote is by itself. That quote is out there floating by itself, not attached to any of your own words. That's a no-no. There's no transition into that quote. Don't do that. Here is a simple way you can fix that. It's not the most advanced way, but at least you can do this. If nothing else, please, I do not want to see this in a paper. I do not want to see a quote by itself, period, quote. I don't want to see that. You can at least always do this. The tigers show the opposite of what Jennifer is. Rich says, comma, the tigers in the panel that she made, blah, 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 blah. You can always just throw the author's name in there. Rich says, comma, and then put the quote. Just add that there. Rich says, comma. Shakespeare says, comma. At least that's something. It's not the best, but it's something. So there's never an excuse to have a quote by itself because you can always just throw that phrase in there. Here's what you really should do, though. All of these three things say the same thing, by the way. They're both quoting the same piece of the poem, and they're both talking about how Aunt Jennifer is unlike the tigers. So this one, unlike the fearful Aunt Jennifer, comma, the tigers in the panel that she made will go on prancing proud and unafraid. This one makes the same point, but it is combining the two, putting the quote with the statement you're trying to make about the quote in a much smoother way. So when I say no free floaters, when it comes to your details, that's what I mean. Do not just throw in a quote by itself. Always add in some language to introduce, to smoothly transition us into the quote. Basically, if I'm reading, I should be able to know that it's a quote. And then this is the best option to really use the quote in with your own logic in with what you're saying. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at an example. So, we have our claim Shakespeare plays with the expectations of form to develop the speaker's unique attitude toward love. While sonnets are traditionally written to praise a love with grand comparisons, Shakespeare begins with the antithesis saying, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun." So we have my detail here, the quote, the first line, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun." But I'm making a point with that detail, so I'm not just throwing in the quote. If I had just said Shakespeare plays with the expectations of form to develop the speaker's unique attitude towards love, my mistress eyes are nothing like the sun. That's nothing. I haven't said anything about that quote. What is that quote showing about form and about unique attitude towards love? So I have made my point with my text evidence. Form for a sonnet, sonnets in general are traditionally written to praise, but he puts a twist on it, which is what I say. He plays the expectations. Um, with this, my mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun, this antithesis. So that's an example. Antithesis meaning opposite. So what now? This is really the third and final thing you have to do. You just have to repeat it. Commentary. So now that you have your evidence, you need to explain your evidence and how your evidence. So explain, like if you have a quote, maybe you need to explain the quote, like give it some context. Make sure we know what the quote is about. Then you need to make sure that that quote, you connect it to your claim. And within your claim, hopefully that means it's connecting it to the main topic. And then finally to your theme. So if you ever wonder, commentary, I feel like is what people often get hung up on and feel like they don't know what to say at that point. Okay, I know how to make a claim, I know how to provide evidence, but then what do you mean explain my evidence? What does that mean? Well, here I'm giving you some concrete things you should do in your commentary to explain your evidence. So explain your evidence, give it some context if it needs it, connect it to the claim, connect it to the main topic, connect it to the theme. That sounds like a lot, but you can really do that in a short amount. So I called it the shoes because it has to match the belt. It has to go with the evidence, and you can't really get it. You can't get anywhere without it. Like, this is the main work of your essay. If you're just doing claims and evidence, then that's an outline. It's not really an essay. So this is where the heart and meat of your essay is. So, an example. Look at this one sentence. I have one sentence to do all this. And the reason for that is because I've done a little bit of it when I introduced the quote. So, this anti comparison upends expectations for the form from the first line. So, let's see what this line is doing. Here's my claim: Shakespeare plays with expectations of form in order to show the unique attitude towards love. So, I need to establish a detail that shows he's playing with the expectations of form. While sonnets are traditionally written one way, Shakespeare begins with the opposite, and then I give an example of that. Then I explain how Shakespeare doing that connects to him playing with the expectations of form. This anti comparison upends expectations for the form of the first line. Have I gotten to the unique attitude towards love yet? No. Okay. So remember, I still have a detail and commentary left. I have to have two details. So I have not explained the speaker's unique attitude towards love yet, and I have not connected it to theme yet. So hopefully, I haven't reread this. Hopefully, I do that. So going back again, we need another detail. So let's see what I have here. However, the sonnet is not devoid of all praise. After a setup of contrasting his mistress with natural beauty, Shakespeare turns expectations again at the volta, saying, "My love is rare as any she belied with false compare." I'm going to have you note a couple things grammatically here. First of all, this slash right here is to indicate a line break. So when you're quoting poetry, that's how you can indicate a line break, is you can pick up at the end of the line, do a slash to indicate it, and then continue on. Also, please notice that the quotation marks are around the quoted material. I put the line numbers, and then the period goes after that citation. So always keep that in mind as well. The period goes after the citation, the quotation marks go before the citation. Also, notice I started in the middle of a sentence here. My love is rare, but I did not put ellipses. Please do not put ellipses. You don't need that. The only time you need ellipses is if it's in the middle. If I like left something out, I began a quote, ended a quote, and left something out of the middle. But anyway, let's get back to our content. So my detail is another way he plays with form, that he turns the expectation. He uses form, he turns the expectation at that. So let's see what commentary I have. So going back, we need another commentary. With this turn, let me move it up here so you can see it. Shakespeare illuminates that what seemed to be criticism before was, in truth, evidence of his love. Unlike many sonnets offering unrealistic and therefore false praise, Sonnet 130 shows that real love is full of idiosyncrasies. All right, so let's read this paragraph all together, and then let's see if I've done what I said I'm supposed to do. So, our thesis. In Sonnet 130, Shakespeare uses form and imagery to portray the speaker's unique attitude towards love, showing that true love does not necessarily fit into prescribed molds. Shakespeare plays with the expectations of form to develop the speaker's unique attitude towards love. While sonnets are traditionally written to praise a love with grand comparisons, Shakespeare begins with the antithesis, saying, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun." This anti comparison upends expectations for the form from the first line. However, the sonnet is not devoid of all praise. After a setup of contrasting his mistress with natural beauty, Shakespeare turns expectations again at the volta, saying, "My love is rare as any she belied with false compare." With this turn, Shakespeare illuminates that what seemed to be criticism before was in truth evidence of his love. Unlike many sonnets offering unrealistic and therefore false praise, Sonnet 130 shows that real love is full of idiosyncrasies. So we have two examples of form. We have how a sonnet is usually full of praise, and instead this one is not praise. Then we have the turn, which is a characteristic of sonnets, and I'm talking about how that is used. Then, do we connect it to this idea of a unique attitude towards love? Well, yes, here it says love is full of idiosyncrasies. If you don't know that word, basically it means like unique things about someone. So there I'm connecting it to the unique attitude towards love. And then do I connect it to theme? True love does not necessarily fit into prescribed molds. The idiosyncrasies part kind of gets to that as well. So, unlike many sonnets, going back to form, offering unrealistic and false praise, Sonnet 130 shows that real love, so true love, does not fit into prescribed molds, is full of idiosyncrasies. So I have done all of these things in this paragraph, used two examples, and connected back to the different parts of my thesis that I need to connect back to. My claim is about form. I've talked about form in my details, and then I've connected all of that back to unique attitudes towards love and the theme that I wanted to talk about. So, even though claim detail commentary, even though that is something you've probably heard for a long time in one form or another, like you probably heard topic sentence, evidence, and then explanation, it's the same thing you've always heard. Obviously, we're trying to take it up a notch a bit and do that exact same thing, but make sure that we're making a lot of connections. So the paragraph isn't actually that long, but each different word, each sentence that I put into it, I'm trying to connect it back to my thesis, to my claim. That's really the hard part about honors and AP writing. It's not that it needs to be long, and it's not that it's so different than anything else. It's just you're always going to connect it back to everything. And so that's um, this final check. Make sure your claim answers your question directly, your detail is relevant to your claim, and your commentary explains how your detail is relevant. Your commentary connects back to everything you need it to connect back to your main topic, your subtopic, and your theme. So it is a lot, but hopefully you get that. So after doing this, you're about to write your own, um, as hopefully should be obvious. Yeah, from How I Met Your Mother. But I want to look back at the paragraph and note that you can always pause this and look back at this example. I've also included this PowerPoint that you can look at yourself. So take a look at this paragraph and see how it compares to the paragraphs you've already written for your Sonnet 130 essay. Now, obviously, your word choice might be different than mine, but think about just the content and how does the content compare to what you have written, and how can you change yours to match more of this content. Okay, I think that's it for this. As always, Let me know if you have any questions.